Alright, welcome back, Betta. I'm gonna continue on with the breeding tutorial here for a minute. It's actually so hot in here right now, I haven't had a chance to run the air conditioner and cool it off. So it's in the 90s like it always is in here. And I don't know how long I'll be able to stand it in here, but we'll give it a shot anyway. Okay, just to recap on a couple of things. I had talked about it before and the video actually ran out. And I actually had a couple of people message me about it, and obviously I didn't do a thorough enough job explaining that part, so I'm going to go back over a couple of things here. They're extremely important and something that you don't want to mess around with. Number one is more than 99% of all beta information on the web, and in particularly YouTube, is complete and utter bullshit. It is bad information. There is only a handful of legitimate master breeders in the world to begin with, and I'm the only one that's online. All the top 500 breeders in the world are not online. So all your information online is coming from the worst possible sources it could be. 99% of it is novices and kids regurgitating and repeating bad information that they got from somebody else. And one of the worst, there's several of them I've already covered, like breeding in glass tanks. You do not want to breed in glass tanks. You want to breed in plastic buckets. There's over 32, there's over 32 different reasons for that. I can't sit here and give you guys a 24-hour long lecture on everything. Just trust me, when I say something is right or something's wrong or something's better or something's worse, it is. I have many reasons for it, a great big long pile of explanations for it. It's just, you know, I'm trying to give you guys a lifetime worth of information here in a matter of short YouTube videos, so I don't have the time to sit there and give you all 50 reasons for something, but I gave you at least a dozen reasons why you do not ever want to breed or raise your fry for the first couple months of their life in a glass tank. There's many reasons why not. Go back and watch the other videos. I give you at least a dozen of them, and there's way more than that. So things like that is a prime example of the beta information on YouTube being completely bullshit. Okay, so one of the things I really need to cover, because apparently I didn't do a good enough job on covering it before, is your males and your females and when to remove them. The minute the last egg comes out of your female, you remove the female. The minute the last egg comes out of your female, the minute she's laid her last egg together, you yank the female. You yank the male about 20 minutes later. You do not leave your male in the tank. You're gonna hear all kinds of stupid bullshit about, oh, he needs to stay there so he can retrieve the eggs from the bottom and place them back in the nest. It's completely bullshit. First of all, not one single egg will fall out of your nest in the first 24 hours. Second of all, any eggs that lay on the bottom for 48 hours are going to be just fine. So what happens is you got some guy doesn't know his ass from a hole in the ground. He sees 40 eggs laying on the bottom and they didn't hatch, and he's like, oh, they didn't hatch because they were on the bottom. No, sorry dude. Being on the bottom had nothing to do with the not hatching part. They didn't not hatch because they were on the bottom. They weren't gonna hatch anyway. Also, another thing about that is the infertilized eggs have a tendency to sink faster or more than fertilized eggs. So you see eggs on the bottom that didn't hatch. Being on the bottom didn't have anything to do with it. Another stupid, just ridiculous fucking thing that you'll hear is males only eat the infertile eggs. That's complete bullshit. All males will snack on eggs no matter what the situation is. It's just, you know, there's some that are bad fish and will eat them all, and there's some that eat a few, and but the bottom line is basically every single male beta will snack on eggs over that period of 3 days before they start free swimming, and even more so when they start free swimming. So apparently I didn't do a good enough job stressing that point in the last videos, which is remove your males. You want to give them about 20 minutes longer than the female, just so they can get the nest a little more situated, and 20 minutes is more than enough for them to lay a few more bubbles underneath the eggs. But being on the bottom in a matter of inches in your tank will not make your eggs not hatch, and not a single egg will fall out in the first 24 hours anyway. And being on bottom for 48 hours will never ever ever make an egg that would have hatched if it was in the nest not hatch. So like I said, you got some jerk off doesn't know his ass from a hole in the ground, sees some eggs on the bottom that didn't hatch, and he's like, oh, they didn't hatch because they were on the bottom. No, they weren't going to hatch anyway. Being on the bottom had nothing to do with it. So your eggs being on the bottom for 48 hours is not going to make them not hatch. If they didn't hatch, they weren't going to hatch anyway. And anybody who breeds can tell you that from time to time you you have lots of eggs that for whatever reason they didn't get fertilized well enough is typically the main reason. They don't hatch. So those same eggs, if they were up in the nest, wouldn't have hatched. So I cannot stress that enough, how important it is to yank your males out 20 minutes after you yank the females out. It's extremely important. The other really bad thing that everybody says on YouTube and on the web is to not feed your males for a couple days before spawning and during that 3 days of spawning. That's the most retarded thing I've ever seen. All you are doing is starving your beta to the point of being deliriously hungry, and he will eat more eggs. So keeping your male in the tank is gonna cost you eggs. Some of them eat all the eggs, some of them only eat a few, but basically all males eat some eggs. And by removing your male right off the bat, you're preserving as many eggs as possible. The male being in there is not keeping any eggs alive or causing any eggs to hatch that were not going to hatch anyway. So that's one of the things that apparently I didn't do a good enough job covering before, because I still had a couple people ask me about that or make comments about that. Anyway, go back, be sure you watch all the other vids in this breeding tutorial before you get up to here. Real quick, before I run out of time on this video, this one is for group conditioning at the moment. This one was water that I made so I could top off a bunch of tanks. I had to add, you have to increase a little bit of water every once in a while to cover for evaporation. And then when you've got your fry, you need to, alright, from the minute you don't use anything, no sponge filter, no nothing in the bucket. It should look like that when they're spawning. There shouldn't be anything in there. A few days after the free swimming hatched period is when you need to put your sponge filter in. Or I'm sorry, is when you need to start doing the water additions. Roughly 3 days after they hatch, you need to add about 1/8 of a gallon, which isn't much, every 24 or 36 hours, which will slowly increase this till it gets to the point that you can't add any more water. That should be roughly 2 weeks after the time they hatch if you did your water additions correctly. At that point is when you can't add any water anymore, is when you add your sponge filter. And one of the most important things for water is to always keep your, okay, if you just have a glass tank, just get yourself a 5-gallon bucket so you can pre-make your water, keep it in the room next to your tank so that when you need to add water, the water is already adjusted, acclimated, and is the same exact temperature as the water that's in the tanks. It's very important always, especially with fry, even the smallest temperature changes with fry can kill them or can mess up their development and their growth. So it's very important to keep the water pre-made, make it way ahead of time. It's best to do it 2 weeks. I try to do it a week or two ahead of time. Every once in a while, with so many tanks, I've got a couple thousand tanks, I get caught with my pants down and I have to use fresh made water, but I try to avoid that at all costs. So you want to pre-make your water ahead of time, at least a couple of days. The longer the better. Give it 2 weeks. Mix it, do what you need to do, throw a couple shrimps or snails in there, or a cheap shitty fish that you don't care about. Let them live in there for a week or two before you actually use the water. I'm about out of time here. Be sure to come back for the next one. This is a multi-part breeding tutorial series. You need to watch all parts from start to finish in order, and you will definitely know more about breeding and have more success than you ever would have on your own or out of 20 years of trying to get bad information off the web.